Kali was afraid of putting his hand inside the water again. He wanted to be strong. He had to be strong emotionally before he could take the leap of faith and believe that his brother was alive. All this time he had thought that all his siblings had died in the fire, the last one being his only brother. He lamented each death and held himself responsible for them, and now he had learned that one of them was safe and was here in this world. Who can it be? Kali wanted to hug his brother if he ever had the chance of meeting him, but then Shukra had said to Kali that it would change everything. Kali didn't understand how it could change anything. He wanted to share this news with Durukti, but he refrained. He was still angry at her. Kali saw Shukra standing at the edge of the boat. He was watching the sunrise. The sky had turned orange and the sun looked like a fruit from afar. Kali walked to the Asura priest and stood next to him. You still haven't seen your past, Shukra sighed. How will it change everything? Shukra pursed his lips. I shouldn't have told you. Well, you have, and you should explain how everything will change. Do you know the prophecy of? Kali arched his brows. I've heard of it. Kalyug will be the last yuga of Ilavarti, where the Dharma and Adharma will fight to determine the fate of the world. Yes, he nodded. There are two main versions of the prophecy, the Manav version and the Asura one. The Manav prophecy says that the Dharma is a Manav and Adharma is an Asura. Asura's prophecy states the opposite. There are other versions of the prophecy too, but all of them say that the last war in Kalyug shall be between Dharma and Adharma, and the prophecy even explicitly states that the Asura will be the last of his kind. When he will fight in Kalyug, he will be a male, though it is not clear whether he will be pure-blooded or not. The problem is, if your brother is alive, he can also be the Asura who will be the Dharma to fight the Adharma. What about Kopo? Do you really think he could be the Dharma? Shukra asked. I guess not. Kali swallowed a lump in his throat. I thought I was special. If you knew who my brother was, why didn't you call him here? Because I believe in you. Not him is not fit to be the Dharma. Kali nodded. If you have got your answer, you should go back and see who your brother is. We have other work to do. What other work? Shukra was watching the ocean. It was moving and the waves were strong. I have a plan that will help you get back your throne. Kali was appalled and excited at the same time. He turned to see Durukti approaching him. She looked worried as she tried to slowly hold Kali's hands, kneeling down next to him. You don't look well, Kali. You need to stop doing what you are doing. Kali huffed in irritation and took her hands off him. Durukti's eyes started welling up. I shouldn't have done what I did to you. I'm sorry. Please accept my apology like I once did. Remember? Kali remembered he had hit her once because of Kalki. Unsure of what to do, Kali ran his hand on his scalp. Hair had started growing on his head. Well, what do you know? I'm not ill anymore. I am feeling much better now. Kali, please pay attention. I don't know where we are, what we are doing, and the woman with her beast, she scares me. She's going to be my wife. Kali sighed. Durukti was getting on his nerves, but he had to keep her fears at bay and just make her understand. He cupped her pretty face in his hand and looked straight at her. I'm trying to go back in time to see what happened to our brother. What are you talking about? I think it's time I go back and see the truth for myself. Durukti was confused but chose to believe him. The eye of Brahma, she whispered. Where is it? How do you know about it? She shook her head. Where is it? The first shard is in the ocean, the sea. She arched her brows. And why do you want to see our brother? Kali paused for a moment and then told her he's alive. Durukti's breath hitched. That's why we have come here. Shukra wants me to see him. I don't believe it. Our brother has been alive all this time. All right, you go see him. She smiled at Kali. But please, let's leave this place after you've seen our brother. We will. As Durukti walked towards the cottage, one of the hyenas started growling at her. Alakshmi whistled and the hyena fell silent. She went inside and sat with Coco and Vikoko. Kali put his hands in the water. It felt chilly for a while. The water caressed his skin before he could feel things again. The current turned hot, humid, and he felt his hands were burning again. But the water was lukewarm. He concentrated on one single memory. When the fire had started and then the present scene dissolved in front of him, a new scene part by part was emerging in front of his eyes until he saw the same small village he used to live in. He saw there were a few Tiavan Bialis getting drunk close to the tavern of the village, but he didn't care for that. He walked around the place until he found his own hut in which he saw younger Kali and Durukti sleeping. It was a starry night. Kali walked towards the last room of their hut where the babies were sleeping. He looked at his siblings and smiled, tears brimming in his eyes. He never thought he would be able to see them again. Kali wiped the tears. He longed to touch them, hold them in his arms, but he knew he couldn't interact with any of them. He cursed himself for what was going to happen. He walked towards his brother. Now Kali had named him Bali after the great king Mahabali who had ruled Ilavarti a long time back. Mahabali had been overthrown by the Vishnu avatar Vaman and had been eventually thrown back in Patal Mahabali's time, and reign was considered the golden age of Ilavarti because it had been perfect. Utopian, one could say, until the tyrant Vaman snatched away his throne from him. Bali, Kali's brother, had small brown eyes. He had such promise. His mind got distracted when he heard noises. They were coming from outside. Perhaps the fight between the Tiavan Bialis had already started. This was how it began. Kali came out instantly to see the fight. He was living through the worst night of his life again. At that moment the fight escalated. They had started punching each other. It was a Rakshas and a Naga. It was a strange combination. Both were strangers in this part of the land. The Manavs were trying to stop them, but one of them got punched in the process. It was pandemonium. Kali was watching the fight unfolding before him when he saw a strange figure holding a pot in the shadows. The figure started spilling black liquid on the floor all around Kali's hut and other huts as well. No one noticed this figure. Everyone was busy watching the fight. The figure took the fire lamp that was hung on the throws of each hut and was about to spill the fire lamp over it when Kali yelled no. The figure stopped, confused. He looked around him. At that moment he turned in Kali's direction, but Kali knew the figure will not be able to see him. The shadows cleared and Kali noticed a strange mark on his. And then he broke the lamp on the floor over the kerosene. The fire crackled and slowly began to engulf the huts. Kali wanted to run towards that figure, but he was more concerned about his own hut. He saw other huts being burnt as people ran scampering and staggering trying to escape. Kali came inside his hut where his younger version had woken up and was shaking. Durukti trying to wake her up. Fire had engulfed their hut now and they were hastening to move to the room where their siblings was trying to fight back tears. He would have to watch as his siblings burned in the fire. His younger self entered the room where his siblings were crying out. He picked up his brother and gently tossed him out the window before he could save the others. The hut exploded. Durukti had managed to drag Kali out. At that moment they both saw their hut crumble before them. He could hear the wails of his siblings. I had saved my brother. Why didn't I remember it? He saw his younger self and Durukti gazing at the burning hut. His siblings' wails were so loud they were being burnt alive, and young Kali could do nothing to help. His younger self fainted. Our brother is there. Couldn't listen to him. Kali now realized why he didn't remember any of this. The trauma had made him repress his memory. Kali wiped his tears. He moved to where he had thrown his brother out. He saw right there in the midst of the fire and the smoke a middle-aged man had picked his brother up and tucked him safely in his cart. He grabbed the cart and walked ahead. Kali followed the middle-aged man who had reached the end of the village away from the burning grounds. The man kissed his brother's forehead. You have nothing to fear, my boy. I will treat you like my own son. Who are you? Kali wanted to speak to the man, but before he could say anything the scene changed and he was in a different village, bigger, greener than the last one. It had a lot of tropical trees and mud huts. Children were playing outside. Kali walked around till he saw the same man talking to a kid. It was Bali now, a little grown up. Kali held back tears. He really is alive. The man told Bali, you must always use your strength. From he pointed at his head. Bali nodded. The scene changed and Kali saw a teenage Bali. His hair had grown. Kali furrowed his brows in concentration. He looks familiar. Another boy was sitting with Bali who also seemed familiar. They were training to fight using wooden sticks. Bali was losing to the older boy. You are weak, the older boy said. Be strong. Who the hell are you? I'm strong. Bali attacked, only to lose again. Charming brother, charming, the older boy said. And then the scene changed. Kali's head was spinning now and he thought he was going to get sick. The eye of Brahma was really affecting him, but he had to see the complete truth. And now he saw another field next to the hills and jungles where the cows had been slaughtered, and a young boy sat in the bloody land weeping to himself. He was hiding his face. Kali went and sat opposite to Bali. When he moved his palms away to reveal his face, a face that Kali recognized, Kali gasped in horror. He was always there in front of me. Kali's blood ran cold. A sea hill ran down his spine. His fingers were numb as he slightly traced Bali's weeping face. Who didn't take notice of him? It can't be. Bali was no more Bali. He had a new name, and Kali surprisingly knew that name. Arjun. Kalki fell thrice from the horse. Haven't you had enough, you little beast? Ratna and Smrit chuckled at the sight. They were at the valley near the frozen river. A few trees lined their snowy path. They were walking inside a dense forest that would lead them to the back of Tar's camp. Kalki stood up as he trudged on the partially frozen leaves, frowning at the horse. The horse neighed angrily. What is wrong with him? Try talking to him, Shuko said. What do you mean? Try talking to him like you talk to me. I thought that was only possible for us. No, it's not. All of this, whatever is happening, these are blessings bestowed by Lord Shiva. Me, this horse, these are gifts by Lord Shiva. You are a gift. Gods, what kind of a gift are you? Genius, stop being a wimp and do it. Your friends are in danger. Padma is in danger, Kalki corrected. He tried to concentrate on the horse. Come on, Kalki tried to concentrate hard when Ratna called out to him, can you stop scrounging your face and start moving? We don't have much time, he sighed. They really didn't have much time. Kalki tried to climb up the horse, and as he did, the horse didn't fidget much. They began to walk on the path. As Kalki wondered about how he had been able to communicate telepathically so easily, Lord Shiva gifted me all of. Lord Shiva was revered as a god who loved animals. He had left certain animals for people, for those who could take care of them. It was a myth that people believed in. As they reached the path and crossed the jungle, they finally came upon the shadier, darker part of the forest they could peer at. Tars camped from their hundreds of tents were lined up across the landscape till the frozen river. The black and furry Vanas could be seen strutting about with axes and spears. They weren't exactly big like the Rakshas, but they looked quite threatening with their protruding faces and their big fish-like eyes. What's the plan? Kalki asked. Ratna glanced at him. Well, I'm glad you asked me. Why? We live in a patriarchal world. I thought you would not bother to ask my opinion because I am a woman. Well, I don't think like that. The plan is to barge our way in and attack, she said. Kalki gulped. That sounds dangerous. Of course it is. Do you have a better idea? I want to save my friend, but I don't want to die. Is this friend close? May he is sort of. Then you should. Kalki shook his head. No, let's do one thing. I'll distract them while you sneak in from there. He pointed towards a small bamboo gate that had been dug inside the ground a few paces away from where they were standing. The gate led to a small shallow opening. Put your horses at the back so they think we're alone, all right? Ratna smiled. All right, how will you distract them? Oh, I have a plan. Ratna and Smrit had gone to the side where the opening was while Kalki instructed Shuko to come. When he whistled, though his whistling skills were not great, he tied his white horse in the corner away from the tents. Kalki came forward to the gates where the two Vanas stood with their spears. Here goes nothing. Ratna and Smrit's faces collapsed. They had realized what Kalki intended to, though he was going for a straight-up encounter. No tactics. Kalki reached the gates. The Vanar guards immediately pointed their spears at him. Think, what would Arjun do? Kalki threw his sword on the ground and raised his hands in surrender. Play the enemy. What do you want? One Vanar asked, poking his chest. Kalki wasn't hurt, but he was surely annoyed. He just smiled and said, I want to meet General Tar. I have come from Lord Bajrang's camp, and I have some news for him. Kalki was bound and gagged, punched and kicked before he was taken to General Tar. He didn't mind all the hassle because he knew that Ratna and Smrit were making their way inside right then. Tar's tent, as Kalki had seen through the first shard of the Eye of Brahma, was huge. It was purple in color. A stable was close to it where his finest stallions had been kept. Kalki realized how vast Tar's army was. The light, scary Vanars in the tent alone were uncountable. This could be a problem. Lord Bajrang's army didn't have much men now, and he could even see some Rakshas and Manavs within the consolidated army as they carried out their business of sharpening weapons or gossiped in the corner. The impending war was keeping the people alert. Their respective generals were informing them about several attacking positions and battle strategies. As Kalki entered the camp, he saw Tar in the center. He was wearing a single breastplate. Multiple weapons were hanging on his belt. He didn't notice Kalki for a while until the guards who had brought him board in respect. Tar looked up and studied Kalki as he came forward from his table where they were strategizing. Who are you? The voice was gruff. Kalki had to look up to see Tar's face. He was gigantic, almost twice the size of a Rakshas, and Rakshas were pretty huge themselves. He was even taller than Lord Bajrang. My identity doesn't matter. What matters is I have some information regarding the Eye of Brahma. The Eye of Brahma. His eyes lit up. He glanced at another Vanar. Kalki remembered he was called Aruna. He had seen him through the first shard of the eye. And what sort of information would that be? It's not with Bajrang, of course it is, he hoarsely added, putting pressure to his words. Kalki shook his head. How do you know? Because he told me. And you want to tell us out of the goodness of your heart? He had a playful smile on his face. I wish I was that good. Kalki shrugged. But I want to free my friend. Who? "He girl you have what about the old man?" Narrowed his gaze as if he couldn't understand what Kalki was up to. In fact, Kalki himself didn't know what he was up to. He was just making up things as he went along. "All right, what's the information on the Eye of Brahma?" Bajrang had sent it out with a messenger, and before Kalki could lie any further, Tal began to laugh. So did Aruna, and then the other Vanas joined them. "What the hell is going on?" Kalki gulped. "That you are trying to be smart." Tal squared his shoulders fiercely in front of him. "I know the Eye of Brahma is not around Bajrang, it is inside him." "How does he know?" "I lived in that village for quite a while. I was under Bajrang's command. I was close to him. I have seen things that he doesn't know, and you know how we plan to use Bajrang? Not kill him. Nah, that'll be too nice for a cruel man like him. We are going to torture him, keep him alive, and use his powers against our enemies. So, if you think you can make a fool out of us," he slowly traced his thick black fingers across Kalki's neck, "you are wrong. He's not cruel." Kalki got serious, as he knew this was going to end badly. Tal was not an idiot. In fact, he had turned out to be a genius. Tal again glanced at Aruna and laughed. His laugh was hoarse, thick, and full of life. It was as if he was cherishing this moment, trying to prove Kalki wrong. "I really don't care about what you all are fighting about, but I know Lord Bajrang is not a bad man. He's a good man who has done good deeds. You seem old, but you act like a kid. What foolish things has he stuffed in your mind? You don't know anything about our culture. You are an outsider, and yet you speak for us. A northerner cannot understand what we suffered in the southern lands." Tar came dangerously close to Kalki. He could feel Tar's breath on his face. Tar resumed in a threatening tone, "Did he tell you that the reason I'm waging a war against him is because of our differing ideologies?" Kalki stared at Tar. "How does he know?" "Ah, of course he believes that's the truth, but that's not it. I mean, surely I would love to spread the Vanar culture more in the north and south, unlike him who is content in being in one place all his life. But there are things he has done, things he shouldn't be proud of, and yet he is." Kalki waited as Tal breathed. The fierce general looked vulnerable. His voice shook a little as he continued his story. "We have been in awe of the so-called Lord Bajrang since we were children, the greatest Vanar who ever lived. We all strive to be strong like him. But I was born during the breaking, when the world was on the brink of collapse. Leprosy was spreading, thousands were dying in war every day, and we all looked up to Bajrang, hoping he would save us. When the war happened with the Manavs and the other tribes, Bajrang didn't do anything. He let it happen. He planned things." His voice rose in anger. "But he didn't do anything. You do realize Bajrang was and still is more powerful than anyone else, and yet he chose not to do anything. He let his people die when he was capable of saving them." Tar showed his hairy arm, where Kalki noticed a claw-shaped scar that had torn part of his skin. "This was when my mother was clutching me, trying to hold on to me before she was taken away by some Rakshas soldiers. She was kidnapped, and I asked Bajrang to help me save my mother. But our great lord, the man I worshipped, said to me, 'I cannot save her, but I will send some people who will.' And they went, and they died, and my mother died as well." He sighed. He was holding back tears as he recalled his past. "And you employed the same Rakshas?" "Because these are not the same Rakshas who did terrible things to my mother. There is good and evil in every tribe. You just need to recognize them." Santar was treating Kalki like a kid who didn't understand things. Kalki, oblivious to it, furrowed his brows. In confusion, he kept his word. Kalki protested to a dead man while people who were alive died every day because of a promise. What good is a promise if it kills your own race? A sad smile spread on his face. "So I pondered over things, and we all devised a plan. Perhaps Bajrang doesn't help us because he doesn't care for us. There's a reason why there are so many Vanars supporting me. It's not because of my idea to open the Vanar community to the world. It's because they all have lost their own families, their livelihood because of Bajrang's inaction, and they want their revenge, and they are willing to do anything to get it. Bajrang just stood by when our people were raped and murdered. So I shall do the same with his supporters. I shall kill and rape and pillage every single one of them, and I don't care if it's a child or a woman or a man. He will face my wrath so that my people can fulfill what they have ached for all this time. Revenge." He flared his nostrils and added, "And people like you interfere with those plans, so I hope." He grabbed Kalki by the throat. "I don't see you again." And then Tal tried to pick him up, but even with his incredible strength, he was unsuccessful. Kalki remained on the ground. No matter how much Tar tried. Tar looked at Kalki puzzled. How are you doing this? I'm so sorry. Kalki looked at Tar. I had no idea about what you went through. Tar was incredulously watching Kalki. I was judging the situation from one perspective, but wars, they must be seen from both perspectives, and you know what? He clenched his jaw. You both are wrong, and this war, this battle is worthless. I thought you didn't care about the war. I don't. Kalki was confused. He cared, but he didn't. It was like a dichotomy that danced in his mind, and his thought process broke up when he saw a Vanar entering from the tent, exclaiming, General, there are two women killing our men. They have just let the Apsaras escape. Tar looked at Kalki, and Kalki knew what he had to do. We are capable of so much. He had repeated Lord Varha's words to himself. So much. I am capable of so much. Kalki clenched his teeth and broke the ropes binding him. With the power of self-belief entrenched in him, he could feel his strength surging. Tar could sense Kalki's power. He punched Kalki in the chest. Kalki backed a little, and it did hurt him. Kalki hurtled himself towards Tar, toppling him over the table, crashing it in the process. Kalki turned over as Tar tried to get up. The Vanars leapt at Kalki. He grabbed the nearest splinter of wood from the cracked table and stabbed one Vanar on his foot. As the screams ensued and they caught the other Vanar's attention, Kalki scuttled towards the main door where another Vanar was waiting with a sword. He charged towards Kalki, and right then Kalki saw the silhouette of a man behind the Vanar. The man sliced his throat. Come on, mate, it was Kripa. Damn. Kalki followed Kripa out of the tent. Accompanying him were Padmaratna, Smrit, and her three Apsaras whom she had rescued from the camp. Manavsrakshas and Vanars were pursuing them. Kripa asked them to hurry towards the frozen river. Kalki was the first one to sprint. His comrades followed behind him. As soon as a Vanar jumped in front of him, Kalki used his elbow to push and toss him in the corner, and then three Vanars appeared in front of him, stopping them in their tracks. Behind these Vanars was the frozen river. The Vanars were steadily moving towards them, pointing their sharp spears. At that moment, Kalki whistled. Shuko flew towards the Vanars. He flapped his wings and poked their faces with his talons. The Vanars covered their faces to protect themselves, and their spears tilted away from Kalki. He grabbed one, jutted it at the Vanar's chest, and pummeled him to the ground. Padma handled the other Vanar by jumping over him and stabbing his face. Ratna handled the last one with a swift stab in the abdomen. They had now reached the bright frozen river. They traversed it carefully but slipped and tripped on their way. The Vanars were now using fire arrows to shoot them down. Some of the arrows missed them and collided on the forest ground. Soon the forest was set ablaze, and if the fire reached the river, they would have nowhere to escape. One arrow was about to hit Padma, but Kalki grabbed it and threw it away. He burned his hand in the process. Thanks, she smiled. Kalki managed to smile back, though he was in a lot of pain. Ratna, Smrit and the other Apsaras were the first ones to reach the other side, which was the frontier where Bajrang's troops were waiting. They helped Ratna to get Kripa and Padma out of the lake. As Kalki was close to the frontier, a fire arrow hit him on the back. Collapsing on the ground with lacerating pain, he pulled the arrow out and tossed it away, but due to the weight of his fall, a crack appeared on the floor and his feet got stuck in the cold river. The coldness was unbearable. His legs were still healing from all the cuts made by the Pishach. As he struggled to gain his balance, Padma, Kripa, and the others tried to come to his rescue. Padma was about to jump, but Kripa stopped her. Don't. Kripa pulled back. Padma, one has to be very light or very fast while stepping on it, otherwise the ice will break and Kalki will drown. Kalki was feeling helpless as he turned to see Tar standing on the other end of the frozen river, glaring at Kalki with all the venomous hatred he could muster. But how will we save him then? Padma was frantic. Kripa looked confused, but there was something else in his expression. He looked like he was in pain, and then Kalki saw it. A huge slash across his chest made by a dagger. Perhaps he was severely wounded. Bleeding had turned his upper body a shade of deep red. He was turning pale, and it looked like he was about to faint. Why didn't I notice this earlier? Everything had happened so fast. Perhaps that's why Kalki had failed to notice what had happened to Kripa, but now his eyes were focused on every individual in front of him. Ratna was bruised too, so was Padma with a scar across her forehead. Everything was so clear. As he looked at them closely, he tried to pull his feet up, but it was to no avail. The fiery arrows began to descend faster on Kalki as he tried to dodge each one of them as much as he could. The Vanars on Kalki's side used Tar's archers, but they weren't as effective as the fiery ones. With the Vanars down, Shuko came towards Kalki, fluttering his wings. He tried to clutch Kalki's Rudraksh, struggling to pull him out with his beak, but the childish effort was in vain. Kalki's feet were slowly turning into dead weights, and that was when he heard the voice, "Need my help?" The voice was very godly, almost angelic, and then he realized who it was. He turned to see Ta's side again, and from there he saw Vanas scattering from their formation. Tar had turned around to find a huge white horse galloping towards them. He was so fast that they just ran away from the horses, with the white horse leapt on the frozen river, moving at an unnatural speed. It reached Kalki in seconds, but the horse didn't stop galloping. When it reached Kalki, he hurriedly grabbed the horse's leg. As the horse sped towards the frontier, Kalki was pulled out. He groaned in pain, busy massaging his feet. He didn't notice Padma running towards him. She hugged him tightly. Kalki forgot how much pain he was in for that brief moment. Realizing what she was doing, Padma stopped embracing him. "You have a good horse," Ratna grinned. "He reminds me of someone who helped me when I was in danger." Devdatta. Kalki's thoughts were interrupted when he saw Kripa sluggishly walking towards him. "Gee, great job, lad, but I suppose I need some help," and with that he fell on the ground. Kalki would be lying if he said he wasn't worried. He was watching the feverish hot face of Kripa with concern. Kripa was shivering like a leaf. The Vana nurses were tending to him, cleaning the blood, stitching it all up, but he had already lost a lot of blood. The gash had been very deep, and the cold was not helping his fever. He was freezing. Tara, who was tending to Kripa, looked over at Kalki and shook her head before leaving to meet Lord Bajrang. She had been their guide, their medical expert, and she had been the one who had nursed Kalki back to health, but she couldn't cure Kripa. Kalki sat there in the corner of the room, hard-faced. Padma was worried, sick. Ratna and Srit were there in the room too. They had come to pay their respects. Kalki sighed as he came forward to look at Kripa. "Hey, old man," he softly said. Kripa was quiet. He seemed to be at peace. "Tell your lass to stop worrying about me." He patted Padma, who was tearing up, trying not to make a scene. "She's not anyone's lass." Kalki clenched his fist, touching the burn he had received while shielding Padma from the attack. In his peaceful days at Shambhala, he had never thought he would be facing so much turmoil. In the time to come, he had never imagined that he would be battered with burns and scars and bruises, only to end up losing the people he truly loved and hated. "You got that right, mate." Kripa coughed. He was growing weak by the second. "How can an endowed die?" Kalki asked. "They are immortals, right?" "I wish I knew, mate. This has never happened to an immortal. I had heard something about them dying if their heads were cut off, but death just by. I guess I'll never know. Maybe you should ask Bhargav Ram when you see him. He is older than me. He might know something." He gave a sad smile to Kalki. Kalki just looked away. "I know you are angry with me. We couldn't complete the conversation we were having earlier in the forest. That's all right. I know enough." Kalki tried hard not to show that he resented Kripa for killing his father. After all, Kripa was on his deathbed. "No, you don't, mate. You think you do, but you don't. Avatars often are full of themselves. Believe me, I've seen one before you. You think you know the world, but you have only experienced a speck of it. What do I not know? Think hiring them. I specifically told them not to hurt anyone." But he shook his head. "Mate, it's more complicated. I had to test you." "Of course you had to," Kalki responded in a sarcastic tone. Kripa blinked slowly. "I know you think I chose you as an avatar because I was tired of waiting for one to come up. Not really. That is not true. As I have told you, I tried to stop the coming of this new age before it even began. As was instructed by Lord Govind, I tried to close up the caves and burn the somas as much as I could, but I failed miserably, and after my repeated failings I stayed in your village Shambhala. I thought there was no other way to stop the age, and then I learnt about you. Your mother was sick during pregnancy. Your father was worried. He had heard about the legend of somas from someone and went to the caves, and he got it." "I know." Kripa shook his head. "No, he didn't. I kind of lied to you before. I told you he got it before I stopped him, but he couldn't because I stopped him from taking it at time. I didn't know why he had wanted to take it. I was safeguarding that cave. He got angry and left. He even fought with me, though I beat him to a pulp." "Mate," he sniggered, "the point is a few days after you were born, you were weak, frail. You were too small for a baby and too thin. Your father realized you won't live for long." A shiver ran down his spine. "He left you in the jungle." Kripa sighed. "I saw it happen. I had wandered into the jungle after a drunken brawl I had had. You looked emaciated, such a small fish-eyed infant. You were my father. Left me. What did you do then?" What any man would do, mate, he smiled. I tried to save you, took you to the shamans, but they said you couldn't be helped, and I knew I had to help you in some way or the other, so I did what Lord Govind specifically told me not to do. I gave you the somas. You were small and gulped it right away, and you regained your strength slowly. I then gave you back to your father and told him about the consequences of my actions. Kalki could feel his eyes stinging. So no, I didn't choose you as an avatar because I had no choice. You didn't become an avatar because of destiny. I became an avatar because of an old drunken and caring man. Kalki was dumbstruck. He wiped the onslaught of tears from his eyes. He couldn't help it. Kripa tried to sit up a little and groan in pain. It was too much to bear, and he was sweating profusely. So Bajrang is wrong. Just so you know, why did you do it? You in a way started this age out of a simple act of kindness. He nodded. Yeah, I did, but at that time, when you were an infant, I didn't see it that way. I saw a baby who was about to die. Kalki glanced at Padma. She was as surprised as Kalki was, and with that she walked out of the room, unable to bear it. Kalki had been wrong all this time about Kripa. He might have been a strange old man, but he had been like a father to Kalki. He had been watching over him since he was a baby, and his real father had left him to die. Why didn't you tell? Geez, no mate, that's not me. He paused, shaking his head. I must tell you though that I did give you the soma to make you powerful, to keep you alive, but remember that an avatar is made of the deeds he commits, either good or bad. That is what defines him as a hero, he said, pointing at the symbol on Kalki's chest. Well, you were just a young boy from Shambhala who thought he was an avatar, but this brands you with absolute confidence that not only should we believe in you but the gods do too. You are the only one capable of becoming this age's savior, but you believed in me before Lord Vishnu did. That's why you followed me when I grew up. You saw me, you checked if I had the traits to become an avatar, to become Dharma. He nodded weakly. I thought you had it in you when you and Bala saved a girl from the tavern, and you helped her. I don't know if you remember, but I was there. I saw how frantically you were searching for a house or her, asking around who she was, where she belonged. You helped the girl as if she was your own. That day I understood that you are a kind man, and a dharma is not just made of strength, but of kindness as well. You said I was Lord Vishnu himself, but I mean an incarnation. I'm only a foot soldier destined to do his bidding, mate. There are multiple versions of this prophecy. I had forgotten some of them. Some said Lord Vishnu shall take birth again in their avatar's body. Others said Lord Vishnu shall choose his finest warrior and make him an avatar, and that this avatar would be a soldier who Lord Vishnu believes in. There are so many theories about it, but it doesn't matter. You know what matters is you are here, and you are strong, and you have the symbol of Srivatsa on your chest. He always believed in me. I might sound contradictory in what I say now and what I had said before, but everything that I just said is true. He chuckled and took deep breaths. I'm a confused man. After all, I'm a drunkard. Yes, I've done horrible things in this world. I've become I lost my brother-in-law and my sis. Ayudh, what happened to them? You are better off not knowing. Mate, he winked, but I do know one thing. I am sorry that I lied to you. After seeing this symbol, he placed his hand on Kalki's chest. I thought, mate, that soma can only work on dharma and adharma, and it'll make other normal people mad. But then again, you were a regular person too at one point. This symbol means that Lord Vishnu has chosen me as an avatar. But if I wasn't the avatar till now, how was I able to channel and speak to other avatars? It was the power of your belief, mate. You were completely convinced that you were an avatar. That kind of confidence is extremely potent, that coupled with the power of the somas enabled you to connect with the others. Kripa coughed violently. Speaking so much was taking a toll on his already diminished strength, but he still went on. I think somas give you the capacity of strength, of enormity, of invincibility, but your deeds shape their nature, their purpose, and that makes you dharma or adharma. I wanted to travel with you till his hand turned cold even before it left the warmth of Kalki's chest. He had closed his eyes as his laborious breathing finally stopped after an age of agony, and he was no more. Believe in yourself. Kalki looked away, batting his eyelids to stop himself from crying again. He glanced at Ratna and Smrith, who didn't shed a tear but patted Kalki on the back with a sign of respect. Kalki couldn't believe Kripa was gone. Old man, may you drink Surus in the heavens too. Kalki smiled faintly, brushing his fingers through the frail white hair of his guru, his friend, and his father. Till the end, Padma was standing near Vanarvita. When Kalki walked towards her, the cherry leaves withered and descended, floating in the sky. The white flame lakes were moving, and there was light snowfall. It was a beautiful day for a man to have breath his last. Kalki's heart felt heavy after the revelations. He was still in denial. Kalki stood behind Padma hoping to ask her how Kripa had gotten his wound, but Padma wrapped her arms around him. She hugged him tightly and said, "A Vanar was taking me into a tent, but Kripa came in between to stop him, and that is when he got slashed." She turned, finally letting Kalki see her face soaked with tears. "Is he gone?" Kalki nodded. She burst out sobbing as she embraced Kalki. He was dumbstruck, but he too wrapped his arms around her waist. "I'm sorry. Thank you for saving me that time. Don't mention it. You are warm," she said, nuzzling his neck. "Thank you." Kalki blushed. "I'm sorry about Arjun." Kalki shook his head, patting her head, running his fingers in her hair. "Don't be, he's alive." What? Her excitement shot out. "Yep," he smiled back. "And I'm sorry I blamed you for Arjun's disappearance. I'm sorry I ever doubted that you were not the avatar." Kalki remembered how he had fought with Padma and Kripa in the forest. He was so guilt-ridden. The woman who cares for him and the man who had watched out for him. And he had been so rude. "Are you leaving then?" Padma moved back, wiping the tears. Kalki thought for a moment as he swiveled his head to see the frantic Vanars. He looked at the women calming down their babies. He saw the men gearing for battle. All these people might be killed by the tyrant General Tar, a monster created by Lord Bajrang himself. He even saw Kara bidding farewell to her 8-year-old. All these Vanars, they believed in Lord Bajrang, and now because of that they might die. Lord Bajrang, no matter what, will not fight in this war, will not be part of this crusade, will not fight for his people. "I always thought," Kalki began, thoughtfully musing as he saw the sunset in the horizon beyond the terrains of Vanarvata, "that being Dharma or an avatar is about having strength. My goal was always about fighting the big bad evil Kali and abdicating him from his throne. Isn't that your destiny?" He shook his head, looking at the Vanar huts. He wondered what would happen if Tar conquered them all. "Being a Dharma is a choice." "A choice for what?" she asked. "A choice to be a better person." He sighed. "I don't think I am leaving Padma. I'm staying right here." The eagle was bigger than any winged creature she had ever seen, but then it wasn't an eagle. Mansa knew it was Taraksha's vehicle. Unlike the eagle was bigger than any winged creature she had ever seen, but then it wasn't an eagle. Mansa knew it was Taraksha's vehicle. Unlike the flying chariots she had seen till then, Mansa could see that Taraksha's vehicle was different. It was huge. Instead of having wings on the sides, a golden eagle had been fashioned in the front, and with its wings the chariot soared in the air. Taraksha's servants stood in the corners. At the back of the chariot was a huge tail from where the somas were being burnt and crackled, igniting it to launch it in the air. Mansa was standing in the meadows. Taraksha landed his bird on the ground and stepped out of the chariot graciously. Taraksha hadn't changed much since the last time Mansa had seen him. His eyes were still smeared with coal. His thin face was absurdly white because of the powder he had used, and he still had a long conical beard. His golden skin glimmered in the sunlight, though she knew he had painted himself to look golden. With his head held high, he came down from the chariot and walked towards Mansa. He was wearing a flowing robe which was being carried by his men. Guards majestic like him surrounded him. As soon as he spoke dryly, "Mansa, we have known each other for a while. Your brother wasn't the friendly kind. You have some nerve coming up here, meeting me." He sighed at the end as if he was already exhausted. Taraksha was exactly what one might call a spoilt rich king, but he was also disciplined and knew how to utilize his kingly power. "Your kingdom is in danger." Taraksha starting humming a melody. "And what makes you say that?" he said, signaling at the guards standing behind Mansa. "Only a handful of them know. Kadru is planning to do something sinister that would affect your kingdom." "Kadru? When one snake enters, the other bites. What's with the Nagas and their politics? I didn't even know till now that you were alive. I thought you had been eaten by the fishes of the north, but no. You are very much." He sighed, panting. "You are very much alive. I can see now. Tell me, why should I believe Vasuki's sister?" "Because I'm telling the truth. You must not let them enter. They are already inside." Mansa gritted her teeth, lightly stamping her foot on the ground. "And you think my kingdom is in grave danger? I have entertained you for long enough because I pity you. But now I must leave and fend for my guests. This is a glorious day." He panted, "to be happy that we are all a single community. She's going to betray you." Mansa wanted to show off the shard from the eye of Brahma, but she refrained. Taraksha was someone who lived in excess, and if he got hold of the shard when he already had Amrit, who knows what he will do. But then what choice did she have? "All right, let me talk to them. I can prove it too." He shook his head. Mansa was getting desperate. She tried to make another attempt to convince Taraksha, but before she could say anything she felt a tremor. The ground shook. Mansa's gaze shot up to see the bridge and the colossal iron barricaded castle standing over multiple solid pillars, but there was one problem. From underneath the pillars Mansa could see smoke emanating, and the next moment the pillars were enveloped in fire. The castle is falling. Taraksha gasped. What in the name of flying Garuda is happening? A guard approached Taraksha and said someone must have brought inflammables to the cave. Oh dear, Taraksha moaned. Oh dear, he said, shaking his head. Mansa took this opportunity to convince Taraksha again. Lord Taraksha, this is Kadru's work. Let me stop her. I want to be the one who catches her red-handed. She's doing this because she doesn't want any partnership with the Supans. All she cares about are the Somas, and now she has the plans. Don't you understand? I'm trying to save you. Taraksha matched Mansa's gaze. Why are you trying to help me? You know I killed your brother's family because I believe that the past doesn't matter. What matters is now, and I want to forge good relations with you. Unlike my brother, I promise you that, and I can prove my word to you by stopping Kadru before she destroys your people and your kingdom. Taraksha thought for a moment, humming to himself. Mansa grunted, leaving the king of Supans and moving towards the vehicle and jumping on it. What do you think you are doing? Your people are going to die. We need to act now. Are you coming with me or not? Either way, I won't let thousands of Supans die just because you take too much time to think. Taraksha sighed, sitting inside the vehicle. I better hope you don't betray me, Snake. Don't worry, I won't, my dear. She cheekily grinned. I know who are my enemies and who are not.